Hi, Jason DeBoover here. Today I'm going to walk us through creating a custom iOS control using Xamarin. Specifically, we're going to create a range slider control or a dual slider control. Now those are the type of controls where you might pick between $10 and $30, or you might pick between 100 calories and 500 calories. Alright, so let's just jump right into the code, shall we? Okay, I've just started us off here with a regular single view project. And we're just going to add a view to start with to our default view controller. And then we'll use our nice Xamarin refactors to build that view, to create that view. And in order to get our touch events and tie into the graphic system correctly, we'll inherit from UI control. And then let's just finish that up by getting our constructors and our init method put in here. Just bear with me a little bit while we get this initial setup ready. And then we will get to the fun stuff in just a second. Okay, now we have a control, but it has no subcontrols, it has no children view. So the way we give a control like that some actual interface, something to actually see, is to start adding graphic elements. And we do that on layers, much like you would on Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. We start painting on layers. And in iOS, a layer is our most efficient animation unit. So when things need to move relative to each other, we're going to put them on different layers. And so that's what we're doing here, is we're just going to start adding our layers. And when we're finished here, we'll actually have two new layer classes, one for drawing the track, one for drawing the knobs. We will have two instances of the knob layer class because we actually have two knobs, of course. Now we can take all these and go back into those classes that we auto-created. Now let's make sure that these are deriving from CA layer. That's what's going to allow our control to use these as painting surfaces. Alright, now that these guys are officially layers, we can actually add them to our control. Okay, and now we just need a place to put these brand new layers within our UI control. So we're just creating some frames. And for now, we're just going to make our track be, about half the height of our control. And anytime we change anything whatsoever that's going to impact how a layer is going to be painted, we need to call setNeedsDisplay, and that's going to let the subsystem know to repaint it for us. And then we're going to take our knobs and we're going to just inset them about 50 pixels. We're actually going to end up having to move these around once we are tracking our touches, so we're not really too worried about what these defaults are right now. We just want to get some values in there so we can see what our control looks like on the screen. So with our frame set, we know where to draw, but we still need to know what to draw. So in order to do that, we're going to override this drawInContext method. So we'll take that context, and right now we're going to make it super simple. We're going to set our fill color to some nice bright color. And then we're actually going to create a rect that completely fills the bounds that we've provided. To this layer. And as I'm sure you can guess, we need to do the same thing over in the knob layer, so we'll just copy and paste that code and change the color. And whoops, come to think of it, that's not going to show up at all if we don't set setNeedsDisplay here. And let's give it a go. Okay, there we have it. A track and two knobs that don't do anything. Woo! Our work's all done here, right? Okay, no, not quite. Alright, the next thing for us to do is start tracking those knobs so they follow our finger around when we touch them, when we slide them around the screen. So what we need to do is tap into the UI controls begin tracking method. So we're going to find that touch point where the user starts the touch operation. So we're using location in view to give us the point relative to this view. So the coordinates relative to this view. Let's do a little hit testing and see if that spot is within our knobs. Okay, if it is, we're going to go ahead and cache the location of that touch, and then we're going to highlight the knob that was touched. Now that property doesn't exist yet, so we're just going to use our little refactors to add it. And then lastly, we are going to call good old setNeedsDisplay because that highlight is actually going to change the color here in a minute. And of course, we're going to want to do the same for our right knob. And then this begin tracking method just needs a boolean to know whether or not we are tracking the touch that it sent us, which in our case just means did we highlight either of our knobs. So now when you touch our control, we check to see if it's within a knob, and if it's within a knob, we start tracking your touch. So now the next step, continue tracking your touch. And that is done in a very intuitively named method, continue tracking. Once again, we'll grab the touch point as it is relative to this view. And much simpler this time. If we've been tracking our left knob layer, then keep doing so and change the left touch point to equal the touch point. And same with the right. Okay, so now that we're tracking all that movement, now we want to actually move our knobs when our fingers drag along them. And so that's going to actually involve moving the frames that we are painting those knobs in. And so if you recall, we actually set those frames up in our init method. And since now we need to move them other times other than just during initialization, we're going to actually have to refactor that out a little bit. And we'll do that here to a method that we'll call setLayerFrames. Okay, so now we actually want to use some of those values that we saved away off in the touchpoint variables. So we're going to set our x's, our x-axes, to match those variables. Of course, we will need to watch for the empty value in those points, in those touch points, because that would mean that we're still in the initialization phase. So we don't actually have any values in there, then we want to use our defaults. So let's just set those variables up now. Okay, and so just like we said before, in addition to calling it from initialization, setLayerFrames will also now be called from continue tracking. And so now we can tell our knobs to be wherever our finger was, wherever we detected our finger slide to be. And then for the sake of the graphics subsystem on iOS, we're going to actually have to create a transaction here to make sure that we don't have a lot of events happening simultaneously that will confuse our layouts as we're trying to move things around on the screen. So we'll actually disable actions within that transaction, and then once we commit, they'll be re-enabled. Okay, our last bit of touch tracking business is to override end tracking, which will detect the finger lift off of the screen, set our highlights to false, set needs display, and we are pretty much done with our touch tracking code. Okay, one more thing before our show and tell. Let's just go over to knob layers and have a little fun here and say if highlighted set fill color to, how about yellow? And our other one will be the else case. And now we're ready to try running again. Oh, whoops. Just like in begin, we're going to want to return to let this know that we are still tracking those touches. And here we go. We've pretty much got all that basic functionality that we were going for. Certainly not a complete control yet by any means, but not a bad start. Okay, we don't really want to stop while it's kind of ugly, do we? So we're going to cheat on this part a little bit. We're going to use the copy and paste method of development and get our drawing filled in. So now we're drawing a complex track layer. It's going to have a nice track, a shadow, a highlight, all sorts of prettiness going on. And yep, you guessed it, we're going to do pretty much the same thing on the knobs. Copy and paste in. And our final run. There it is. Sure looks pretty to me. Alright guys, that's it. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed watching the video. I know I enjoyed putting it together. Obviously we don't have a final production level control here since we don't really have collision detection between the knobs. We don't even have a way to get values out yet, so there's definitely some polish to add to it. If you want the source code for this demo, then visit my GitHub, and in fact, if you want the source code for a fully functional version with the values, with the collision detection and all the other nice polish, that's also available on my GitHub. So check that out. Thanks.